Welcome to Real Talk with Sarah. I'm your host, Sarah Roberts, and in this show, we are talking about an issue that more of us are facing as we continue to get older. We're talking about the issue of caregiving. Many people are finding themselves in the so-called sandwich generation, where they're not only raising and supporting their own kids, but they're also caring for an aging or sick parent as well. It's a huge load to bear, and tonight we want to have a conversation to help ease the burden so many of you are facing. I've enlisted the help of transition experts Pierrette, Raymond, and Liko of Moving Forward Matters, an organization that helps all sorts of people transition and who have their own personal experiences and professional approaches to helping caregivers know that there is hope and there is help so that they can make the most of this challenging life stage. So let's get started. Episode 19 of Real Talk with Sarah starts right now. With an aging population, the statistics show that 1/3 of Canadians are caring for an aging loved one. How can we know when the time is right to begin caring for them? How do we handle differences of opinions within the family as to how to best care for them? And how do we manage our emotions and maintain our own health and energy in the process? Luckily, I've got Pierrette Raymond with me to help us navigate this emotionally charged topic and help us create a solid framework for moving forward. Welcome, Pierrette.
Thanks, Sarah.
I'm so happy to finally be sitting down having this conversation with you.
I'm delighted that we're going to have this conversation. It's so needed, and you know what you're going through, what a lot of our families are going through, our friends are going through. It's important that we have these conversations and let people know that there are resources and they're not alone.
Absolutely. That message of people not being alone is so important to me, and I know it's so important to you. So in your personal and professional experience with caregiving and helping people transition into that role, what is the big overarching message that you sort of want to share with us?
I think the biggest thing is not to wait to have these important conversations with loved ones. And even getting your own affairs organized long before, we're still very young in relative terms. And even those that are, purchasing their new home, their first time homes, they should also be getting things in order, a will, a power of attorney. Those are important things to have in place. As our loved ones are aging, it's important that we have conversations about their wishes, that we open up the dialogue about what would you like should, God forbid, something happen, and who's going to get what. Is there some things in the home that you'd like others to have? And start having those conversations when there's no crisis, there's no pressure, no one's in the hospital, nobody's dying, right? It's not at that point. So you can have open conversations, respectful conversations, and start early.
So when you're saying start early, you're suggesting before any signs of maybe cognitive decline or any kind of dementia might be an issue, any type of injury or illness. You're talking before any of that to really have those conversations. How do those start? Is it starting with the parents that have it with their kids? Or is it the kids having it with the parents?
It could go either way.
Okay.
So for my personal experience, my mom and father both died, and they died several years apart, but they each had very different experiences. And my in-laws are still living. So after my parents died, and I was working with a lot of families who are going through the process of downsizing and moving, or now they're dealing with an estate, I started having these conversations at the dinner table, just saying, do you guys have a will? Do you have things already in place that, for myself, my husband, his sister passed away, so he's the only surviving child. What are some of the things that you guys want? What are some of the things that you have, as I mentioned already, that you'd love to gift to others? My mother-in-law has a beautiful collection of jewelry. Who's going to get the jewelry? Who does she want the jewelry to go to? So just basic conversations. And it took a while for her to finally say, I'm going to take out my jewelry pieces, let's catalog it, and we'll put a list down of who gets what.
Wow.
And I said, that's fantastic. Now, should something happen, that's covered. I don't have to make that decision. My husband doesn't have to make that decision. There won't be any fighting because she's already determined who she'd like, which pieces she'd like to gift to her loved ones.
That's such an important conversation that I don't think we think about. The pieces, the things that we collect over our lives. they are important to us. We do have some attachment to form, of course, and we want them to go to the people that we want them to go to.
Right.
So you suggest cataloging, writing it down.
Especially things that have value. You know, when it comes to clothing, what's in the linen closet, not too many people are going to fight about those things. It's the things of value, or that have a perceived value, that are maybe something that is from another loved one. Those are the pieces that are the important pieces to discuss. The other side is their personal wishes. What if something happens? Do you want a do not resuscitate? How do you want us to care for you if something happens in your end of life journey? They're hard conversations to have, but they're much easier to have now. And there are resources online. We do have resources on our website at movingforwardmatters.com.
Like templates or things that...
Conversation starters, templates that you can go through. You can sit down, you can fill them out for yourself first. I would suggest for adult children who want to have this conversation with their parents, or the parents who want to bring in the conversation with their child, fill out the documentation first and say, here's something that I filled out. Let's have a conversation, or I'd be curious to know what your wishes would be. And you can just leave material behind. Or say, I had a conversation with my girlfriend or with a friend, and they're going through something really, really hard right now. I would really like that to not be our experience. So here's some things that she's going through that maybe we can talk about now. And also collect some resources at a resource center, at the hospital, that you can leave behind and say, here's some things that we can have a conversation about at dinner next week, or when we're having tea, or when we're sitting outside on the balcony, or we're doing something together in home where we can have, and it's just a 5-10 minute conversation.
Okay.
It's not a long conversation.
Let's schedule an hour to have a meeting and have,
Very casual.
Yeah.
Right? You're not making any decisions.
Yeah.
You're just being curious about desires and wants and needs and having an open dialogue about it. So at least some things have been discussed. And if there's other siblings who are not local, I recommend you either record the conversation with notes or record it with your recorder on your telephone, on your phone, so that your siblings can also hear what the parents' wishes are. You can save that in a drive, so that later the entire family has the same information.
Or maybe even using technology, setting up like a FaceTime, where everybody sets a time that we're going to do this.
Yeah.
I know you're saying it's more informal, but maybe if you did want to include all members, you could do it through using technology.
Yeah, and make it casual.
Okay.
Over a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, over light lunch, and it's not.
Why casual? Why that? Is it because
remove the stress?
Remove the stress.
And keep it very respectful. I think that's the biggest thing as well in terms of what families go through. We all have our own wants and desires and how we think something should unfold.
Yes.
But we may not know the wants and desires of others. So you're nodding, you understand. So when we have open conversations and we keep it respectful, we allow others to share what they think, what they're feeling, and we're not judging. We're just having an open dialogue so that we can come back and circle back to it later.
Well, and I have to imagine, I'm 47 going on 48. I don't necessarily know that I've been thinking this way yet, but I'm thinking, if I'm an adult and I have raised children, I've gone through my life, made lots of good decisions, bad decisions, made my life, created all of this around me, and now all of a sudden my kids are coming in and kind of trying to tell me what to do, I imagine that must be a really tough place. It's almost like a role reversal in a way, where the children become almost parenting the adults. That's got to be a very odd dynamic.
I think I know that's why you have these conversations early.
Yes.
Because during a time of crisis, that's when it's hard to have clarity. That's when it's hard to make really good decisions, because we're basing things on our emotions.
Totally.
We take logic out of it, and it's very emotional, it's very charged. You're also dealing with your own feelings of what's going on while you're trying to look out for somebody else or trying to decide for the family. So when it comes to that, is to have, like I'm saying, have those conversations early. And again, your parents have been adults their entire lives.
Yeah.
They've been independent. They don't need you to tell them what to do.
Right.
But you certainly can give them resources so they can make those decisions, and let them know, I'm not deciding for you. I'm just here so I can know what you want. If something happens, I can make those decisions for you based on what you've already told us.
I think this is such a brilliant approach, and I kind of love what you said. Maybe even telling a tall tale and saying that a friend of yours has gone through something, even if it isn't true, letting your parent know that you've seen this in your experience, that it doesn't go well, and you want that not to be the case in this experience.
And you're seeing stories on social media all the time. So you can pull those stories in and say, I've read about this, and I would hate for this to happen to you. What could we do now to prepare or plan for that?
Totally.
And it's just, you know, even if it's just some point form note so that everybody's on the same page, it'll go such a long way.
So what if everybody's not on the same page? As much as you try to have these conversations, but siblings, one has one view and the other has another, how do we manage that?
Sometimes you won't. That's the reality. Sometimes that infighting becomes a grudge. It becomes something that I will not get over this. I've been mistreated. That happens. So sometimes you have to just either separate yourself from a loved one because it's very toxic, or you come together and you see each other's point of view and you find some middle ground. Sometimes you may need to bring a mediator in if it goes to that extreme. If we're dealing with property now and you're dealing with an estate, that's where lawyers can get involved. It's really seeing the point of view of the other person and not just seeing your own way of thinking and seeing things. Because when we feel we're right, we can't see if somebody else is right. So it's having that opportunity to see, I see what you're saying, this is what I'm seeing, what's the middle ground? And that takes a lot of maturity, and it also takes taking the emotions out and really being respectful and compassionate with each other. And that can be hard when things are tough.
And that's, again, why having these conversations early. So for only children, I mean, this is feeling like a big burden on an only child. They don't have anyone that they get to talk to. So same thing, though, just having those early conversations with mom, with dad.
And do your own due diligence. Like, take it upon yourself to see what resources are in your own city should something happen. What are some of the things that you could do to help even prepare yourself that you can now share with your parents to say, I've put this in place, do you have this in place? So take your own responsibilities and use them as either a modeling piece, a guidance, a mentorship for your aging parents or someone else that's a loved one, and use your own personal experience to guide them through something. Because if you're coming in and you don't know what you don't know, it's hard to help someone else. So if you're informed and you've done some research and you've done some homework and put some things in place, you can easily have that conversation. Much easier to do it that way than saying, I think you should do this, when you don't even know even if it's good for them or not.
And again, I just think it's this feeling that these parents of ours have been adults the whole time we've known them. They have such autonomy over their own lives for so long. And then for us to try to come in and tell them what we think is the best way for them to move forward and transition.
Nobody wants to lose control, and it comes down to, driver's license. That's usually one of the very big ones. When doctor says you have to have your driver's license removed, those are tough. So you can have those conversations long before they're necessary and support the medical team.
More with Pierrette after the break. Back in a moment. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're talking about caregiving on this show, and I've got home transition expert Pierrette Raymond helping us with the emotional aspects of caregiving. So before the break, we sort of touched on a bit of the emotional side of things. The feelings of loss and grief, I know, are huge when it comes to caregiving. Let's kind of talk about the emotional side.
Every transition is emotional. Moving, going to school for our children, even our own transitions of changing a job. We're at a crossroad. So you can imagine how emotional it is when something like this happens, when somebody gets ill and now you're taking on the responsibility to help, and or you have other people in your life who are not stepping up, which compounds how you're feeling. So
add some resentment maybe into the...
And it can be very, very emotional and very taxing physically, taxing emotionally and psychologically. Oftentimes we forget that the emotional part of who we are affects how we feel physically. We can become ill. We can now become the person who is dealing with something because we've given so much of ourselves and haven't taken care of ourselves while we're caregiving. And if we're speaking specifically about caregiving, all of us have been in a caregiver role at one point or another, whether we have a spouse that fell ill and now we have to take care of them, a child that's been ill, or a loved one that's dealing with a serious illness. We've all been in a caregiving position before. It's how do we navigate that when it's our turn to now take care of somebody else, and it could be longer term.
And that's, I think, part of the issue too. For some people, there's no light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
If they're dealing with parents that have dementia or Alzheimer's disease or other types of cognitive decline, where or even cancers, other, all these things that we just don't know when the end is going to come.
Right, and that can be a burden in itself because you have to put your life on hold.
Yep.
Right, you're putting your life on hold to care for someone that you absolutely love, and sometimes it can be, I did a video with 4 or 5 different caregivers, and it was all about caregiving, and every woman in that video was sharing how challenging it was, where sometimes you just wanted it to end, but to end meant that your loved one needed to die. So then you're dealing with all this grief and shame. How can I even be thinking of this? I love you, I want you to live, but I can get back to my life and things can become normal again if you die. And that just opens up a whole other part of grief and loss that a lot of people just don't deal with. They'll just don't have that feeling, don't have that thought, when it's absolutely normal.
Yes.
We all want to get back to our lives when something's changing, when we're going through a time of transition, and when somebody's dying. But that sometimes just means having those thoughts that really make us feel terrible. But they're normal. And they're okay to have, but they're also okay to just table. And the best thing to do when you're dealing with that is to know that that's a normal feeling, but I also love you and I want you to live. Yeah. Or it's okay that it's okay that I love you, but I'm also going to let you go.
And are there ways when people are going through the experience that they don't lose themselves so much? I know we hear about so much burnout, so many issues of people dealing with compassion fatigue when they are caregiving. Is there a way that they don't need to necessarily deplete themselves so much? Or am I just pie in the sky thinking that because I haven't been in the role myself?
Ask for help.
Ask for help.
It's that simple. It's not that simple to do. Even when I was caregiving for my mom, I was at the hospital with her. It took me almost 4 weeks to ask my brother and sister, I need your help. I need someone to come and relieve me so I can go for a walk, so I can take a break from being here at the hospital with mom. And it took me that long to take that break. And after I've done my bereavement studies and I study what we're talking about now, I would have asked for help much sooner.
Can I ask, why would your siblings not have sort of offered the help? Was there ever a feeling
thought I was okay?
They thought that you had it all under control?
Exactly.
Because Pierrette just takes care of everything.
Yeah.
She is the strong one. She is the organized one. Yeah, I can see that.
And those that are watching can raise their hand and say, that's me.
Yep.
I'm the rescuer.
Yep.
I'm the one who's going to show up, and I have other loved ones who won't.
Yep.
Recognize that that's going to happen as well. And make sure that you do let them know, I need your help, I can't do this on my own. Assign some things, let them know what are some of the things you can help with. I even started asking, you bring me a home-cooked meal? I'm so tired of eating hospital food.
Yes.
Can you bring me a home-cooked meal? That was easy, right? But they didn't know. You don't know what you don't know until it becomes known.
So before you started asking for help, were you feeling some resentment that everything felt like it was on your shoulders?
Yeah, they live there. And I packed myself up from Ottawa to Timmins to be with my mom, thinking this is not going to take long, she's going to die. It took 12 weeks, so 3 months. And I was with her for those 3 months, but that first month, I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to take care of you, Mom. I'm going to be here till the end. And I really didn't know how to ask for help either. And absolutely, I was feeling resentment. You guys live here, right? Yeah. And they know this story, so it's not a surprise to them. But you guys live here. I need your help. Like, you can take an hour from your day to come and help. Not as easy as I thought, but then when I finally reached out and told them, rather than hold it in, which is what we do, and be very open about it and respectful, saying, I need your help, can you help me, I'm getting really tired. They started seeing that I was getting tired too, and saying yes to the help. So now that's the other flip side. So that now your family's saying, oh, you need help, here's how I'm going to help. Not you saying, well, I don't need that kind of help, and pushing them away. Oh,
you're saying that we accept the help that they are willing to offer us.
Right, right, because it's easy to say, okay, I need help, and then they might show up with help that you don't necessarily want.
Yes.
So also being clear about what kind of help, and then being welcoming and grateful for the help that you get. So caregiver burnout comes when we try to take too much on our own, take it too much on by ourselves. Yeah. We don't take breaks. We don't take time away from the situation, and we deplete our resources. So we need to exercise, we need to sleep, we need to eat well. And those are the first things to go when we're caring for somebody else, because we just show up, time goes by, we haven't had lunch, we're now into the evening, we haven't had dinner. Why are we feeling so awful? It's because we're not taking care of ourselves. And you are such a health advocate. It'd be so important that people remember that your regular day may have changed, but your body still needs what it needs to be well.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think just honoring that and honoring the fact that we can't do it all.
Correct. Yeah.
We cannot, on every single given day, get everything right and check every box.
On a good day.
On a good day.
Yeah.
So maybe just releasing that a little bit. I think it's interesting that I imagine that it is the sort of A-type personality, maybe the firstborn child. I don't know. I'm sort of
a middle
guessing.
child.
Okay. So I'm just wondering this sort of this one member of the family that might want to sort of take on that role and feel like they're the one to do it, but then there are those feelings of resentment. This is stuff, these are emotional pieces that can come up all throughout life that I think it might sometimes take an event like a parent getting sick to all of a sudden be able to go deeper a little bit with our own emotional realm. And I wonder if maybe the whole caregiving experience, I think every experience in our lives levels us up if we allow it to, if we see the lessons in it and if we take the gifts in it. I imagine that a lot of people feel like it's just a burden, there is so much to do, we get burned out, and we don't take the gifts that are inside that painful experience. I wonder what's inside of what's inside of it. There's, there have to be these nuggets of.
And the other thing to recognize is when something like this happens, it could stir up things that happened in the past. Yeah. And that can now come to the surface. And, it's like a little thing that you have with your spouse or partner that you don't talk about, and you just let it go, and all of a sudden it blows into some big fight. This could be a very big catalyst for that. So remembering that you're in this moment and all those other past moments, although they were part of that experience, not necessarily bring them into this experience. You can heal one experience at a time by talking about it, by healing this experience, and then let's talk about this other experience later at a better time. Because right now we're in a crisis, and in a crisis you deal with a crisis.
And again, like you say, it's so important to have the conversations before we're in a crisis, because making those decisions when we're in that mode, it's so much harder.
Yeah.
We're just acting from our fight or flight, from our sympathetic nervous system. We're just not able to calmly make those choices.
And we also have blinders on.
Yeah.
We can't see other people's perspective. We can't see what's around us. We just see what we see, when we need to just relax that and be flexible and be curious about what other people are going through as well, so that we can be there not only for the loved one, but for each other, which is important.
Totally important.
Yeah.
We've got about a minute left. What would you love to impart to people when it comes to caregiving?
I think you need to celebrate when you do show up. I think you need to pat yourself on the back and not look for it from others. You're not going to get it. So if you're making that decision to be there for a loved one, you celebrate that and you honor that, and don't go looking for outside good job, because you're probably not going to get it.
Even from the loved one that you're caregiving for?
It's quite possible. So honor what you've chosen to do to support that. If you've chosen not to be there, allow yourself to be okay with that. Sometimes there's a lot of regret because they weren't there for the loved one. The loved one passes and now they're moving forward going, I should have been there. You don't know what you don't know. So use that for future experiences where now you can make that decision to show up. So forgive yourself. If you carry that burden of guilt, you didn't know that your loved one was going to die. You didn't know that your loved one was going to be sick. It's okay. Let it go. You can make better decisions or other decisions next time.
I imagine guilt is a huge issue for people. Just that feeling of not doing enough, not, feeling like we don't know all of the tools that are out there. Thank goodness for the work that you do with Moving Forward Matters, with helping us to really be able to transition into this area in such a healthier way.
Yeah, thank you
so much for being here. I'm so happy to have you. All right, I know you've helped a lot of people. After the break, I'll have Liko sharing her personal story with caregiving. Back in a moment. Welcome back to Real Talk with Sarah. If you're just joining us, we're talking about caregiving on this show, and I've got Liko, Managing Director of Moving Forward Matters, with me to share her personal story of caregiving and the lessons she learned along the way. Welcome, Sue.
Well, thank you for having me here.
Thank you for being here. We go back a long time.
We do.
It's amazing. Watching your journey has been really remarkable, and I'm not at all surprised with where you have landed in your life. I'm really happy for how things have come full circle, it seems.
Yeah, life is unexpected, and it is quite interesting to see where people land.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit back. Let's go a little bit back to where your caregiving story sort of began, because I know you have obviously professional experience.
Right.
You've got a lot of personal experience with caregiving.
I do, and it started as my mother's story. My mother is an only child from an immigrant family. They came in the 50s. And as a single, or as an only child, she was the one that was taking care of my grandparents. And when I was in my mid to late teens, my grandmother was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. So I was there to witness her journey. And it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. I had a very special relationship with my grandmother. She was a lovely, lovely woman. Not necessarily the best mom, just due to circumstances, a bit of a dysfunctional family going on there. So my mom really needed emotional and physical support in helping with decision making when it came to my grandparents.
And who did she ask for that support from?
Well, it fell on me. I'm the younger of two daughters, and my sister was already out of town going to university, so I was the one that was still at home. So, and my mom and I had a very different relationship. So she and I were more along the terms of friends as opposed to mother and daughter. So for me, it was easy for me to step in to give her that emotional, physical support that she needed to make decisions when it came to my grandparents. So my grandmother went into a long-term care facility, and we watched her slowly decline, unfortunately, as most Alzheimer's patients do, and then pass away. And my grandfather was living on his own, and probably in his mid-80s, my mother again turned to me for emotional support. She was feeling very guilty at the fact that she knew it was time to move my grandfather out of his home. And it was a home that he had custom built. So for him, being an immigrant and working his way through and becoming to a point in his life where we could actually build his own home and all of that, it was his dream home, and then having to move him out of it.
And why did your mother feel that he needed to move? Did he also develop Alzheimer's? Or?
He hadn't developed Alzheimer's. He didn't have dementia, but he was showing signs of age. So forgetting pots on the stove, letting them burn. Forgetting he had a dog, forgetting the dog outside in the middle of winter. Small things, but big things.
Not to the dog.
Yeah, not to the dog, and not to, burning down the house, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So small things that accumulate over time into big things.
Yeah.
So little things that he was not doing, not taking care of himself, forgetting about things, forgetting to pay bills. These are all signs of, okay, maybe it's time for a little extra help.
Yeah.
Or if it's happening so often that, maybe it's time to remove some of that responsibility.
Is that when you think that families should be, I know Pierrette was talking about having the conversations really early,
yeah.
But then does it come down to we need to start seeing signs before we start looking at long-term care facilities or having home care? Is that what usually happens, is that we start to see the stove being left on or the dog being left out? Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, because people aren't having those conversations early as to, okay, what happens when this happens? What's the next step?
Yeah.
People are then seeing signs, and a lot of the children will ignore it for a while, thinking, oh, it's just, it's just circumstances, until they can't ignore it anymore. And that's the time that they start looking into, okay, what do we do now? But really, those decisions should have been made long ago.
Yeah.
So that they know, okay, we're at that point now.
Yes.
And this is what we decided 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. This is what the decision that was made then. Does it still apply?
Yep.
Still applies? Okay, next step is. And then you know that your parent is on board.
Yes.
Because they were part of that decision-making process.
Brilliant. And especially, I imagine, with seniors that have cognitive decline, dementia, Alzheimer's, that they can trust. There can be some a feeling that they at least know that their wishes are being respected, even if they're not fully able to remember back to that conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just wondering. That might be reassuring.
It depends on where they're at within their disease.
Right.
So that really is dependent on the person, on the individual.
Yeah.
But where it really does make a difference is for the caregiver. Because you know that this discussion has already been had. It's already been talked through. All the emotions have been played. That was dealt with long ago. Now it's just a matter of, okay, we already made these decisions.
Yeah.
And everybody was on board and everybody's okay with this. So now we know that this is the time to make that step, whether it's bringing in-home care. Because, for a certain length of time, they're still okay at home.
Okay, so this is aging in place. You talk
aging
about
in
that a lot. So aging in place is bringing in-home care, whether or not that's a family member or a paid employee.
Yeah, and
personnel.
there's aging in place is broad subject, because really it's about, okay, are we still in a situation where we're safe at home? Is the house safe, or is the apartment safe, or whatever? Your physical safety. And whether or not you're still capable, if you still have the cognitive ability and the physical ability to stay in your own home. So then, yes, you can bring in-home care, whether that is a relative to come and to live with you, to help you out with your daily living, or whether you bring in an outside company that specializes in in-home care. So in-home care is a variety of different things. So you could have somebody come in to do just laundry and light housekeeping. That's in-home care. It can go to, having somebody to go out and do groceries and deliver them and put them away. That can be part of the in-home care. It could just be companionship. A lot of seniors get very lonely.
I was going to say, even I imagine having someone come in to bring the groceries in, there must be a nice feeling of at least having that companionship. So then there is caregiving that's just simply for companionship, what you're saying.
It is. Yeah, there is, absolutely. Okay. So you can have somebody come in on a regular basis for a few hours, a week, or a few hours every day, just to make sure that, you've had something to eat, sit down and make a cup of tea. Play card games, color, whatever it is that the person likes to do. It's just to have that social interaction, because a lot of seniors end up living alone.
Yeah, and I imagine that it takes some of the burden from the kids, if there are kids involved that are, caretaking, that now they're able to say, we've got this support that now on Wednesdays and Fridays, we know that mom, dad has somebody coming in to play bridge with them. And
absolutely.
It can take some of that burden away.
Yeah. And so then that's one aspect of aging in place. So one of the reasons that people really do want to age in their own home is, one, it's familiar. And the second part, and this is the big part, is that they have their support systems in the neighborhood. They have their favorite restaurants. They have their doctor's offices generally within the area. They have their pharmacy where they know their pharmacist by name and the pharmacist knows them by name. Yeah. It's all these little things. Their hairdresser is in the neighborhood.
And that can help to solidify routine, which I know is so important for seniors.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's having that connection, because if you uproot them and move them somewhere else, whether it's within the same city or if it's in a new city, then they have to get all this new support system built again. And the stress of that.
Yes.
You know, even just for us.
Yeah.
You know, can you imagine going out and having to find a new hairdresser because your hairdresser's moved?
No.
It's like,
no, it took 10 years to find a good one. No.
Exactly. So, you know, when you're moving somebody out of an area that I live in an older neighborhood in Ottawa, and I have a couple of neighbors across the street from me that are older couples. And one gentleman is in his 90s, and he bought the house and has been living there since the 50s. So when you think, you know, they've been there for 70 years.
This is their home.
This is their neighborhood. They know what's happening.
Yeah.
They know everybody in the neighborhood. You know, the local grocery store is next door. They can just walk over and walk home. But when you're changing all of that, I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening as you age. You know, you could develop chronic diseases, long-term diseases. A lot of seniors have visual problems, so cataracts and glaucoma, a lot of different things that happen. Diabetes happens for a lot of seniors as well. So when you start seeing that physically your body is changing, you know, you have all that dynamics to deal with, and it can be very stressful. To be thinking about leaving your home that you've been in for 30, 40 years, 20 years, whatever it is, and you've built your support system around you, then to be moved and having to start that all over again.
Yeah, no way. All right, more with Sue after the break. Back in a moment. If you're just joining us, I have home transition expert Sue Liko with me to explore ways we can better prepare ourselves to become caregivers before we are faced with the decision. So I want to get into sort of talking about the legal documents, the real heavy stuff that we need to have in place for the time that we do become a caregiver.
Right. So one of the things, and this goes back to what you were talking about with Pierrette, is having that conversation. You need to have the will in place. So the legal aspects of what happens to your possessions. So if you can videotape yourself saying, I want certain people to have this, have that, so that there's no confusion as to who it belongs to once the person passes. But while you're still alive, you also want to have power of attorney. So a lot of people don't know that there are actually two power of attorneys, one for health and one for personal finances. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the same person.
Okay, should they be the same person? Should they not be the same person? Does it not matter?
I think in some relationships, there is only one person. You know, like in my mother's situation, she was the only child.
Yeah, sure.
And there were no other relatives here in Canada. So the responsibility fell on her for both finances and personal health.
Right.
In other situations where there are multiple children, in my family, my relationship with my mother is very, very different from my sister's relationship with my mother. So in that case, if she wanted to split it up so that personal health is with my sister and financial is with myself, or vice versa, you have the option. Generally, I would recommend that you have more than one person, because my sister is older than me. What if she passes?
And is it always recommended that it's family members?
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. What you really want is someone that you respect and know that respects you, because really what it is that you're putting a lot of power into the hands of this other person over you. So you want to make sure that they respect you and your decisions, that they will follow through on what you want to have done.
How does power of attorney work, as far as does the one responsible sign paperwork, and then from that moment on they make all health decisions, or that from that moment on they make all financial decisions, or how does it work?
It's set up in advance, and generally the way that it happens is that there has to be an assessment done on the person to make sure that they are no longer able to make decision making for themselves. So they're impaired in decision-making process. So there is a process in place. You can't just take power of attorney and say, well, I'm taking over for you now. Because someone who still has, full cognitive ability and is perfectly capable of making decisions for themselves, that power of attorney should not then be in someone else's hands. Mm-hmm. So it's once you get to a position where you can't make decisions for yourself, if you get into a car accident and you're in a coma, power of attorney will fall into the person's hand because then there is no one there to make the decision, right? You can't make it for yourself.
But what if it's less obvious than that? If it's a slow decline, if it's a lengthy disease, I mean, how, if that's from the health side, or if it's, cognitively with financial decisions, how does that get decided? These are not conversations you can have 20 years prior. We don't know when this is going to come up.
You can have the conversation as to who's going to become your power of attorney and to get the paperwork in place. Like I said, there isn't an assessment process. Doctors are involved, the lawyers become involved, and then it transfers over. But everything has to be lined up. So you can't just say, oh, well, I'm your power of attorney, I'm not going to take over because I don't believe that you're able to make these decisions for yourself anymore, or I don't agree with the decisions that you're making, so I'm going to start making them for you. Nobody wants that. The other thing that you need to start putting into place too is care directives, like understanding where your health is going. If you've been diagnosed with a disease and you know that there's going to be decline over the years, write out or videotape or sit down with your loved ones or even get a lawyer involved to say, okay, this is the route that my health is going to go according to typical statistics with this disease. Mm-hmm. So this is the way that I want my life to be. If you want to be put into palliative care, if you want palliative care at home, all of these things can be put into place. If you do not want to have heroic measures taken, or you have a do not resuscitate, make sure that your family knows that and that you've had that conversation with them. This goes back to what you and Pierrette were talking about before. Having these conversations, that your family needs to know what you want to have done when you're in a capacity where you can't speak for yourself.
Absolutely.
That's why these advanced care directives are set into place, so that you've already said, this is what I want. So now it's your family's time to come in and say, okay, this is what mom or dad wanted. Now it's our responsibility to make sure that this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, and these are some of the resources that you have, templates and things like that. When people link up with Moving Forward Matters, you can help people to put all of this in the steps in place. We have
a great network of people and businesses here locally in Ottawa. It's amazing. We have such a wide variety of businesses here that are now helping seniors and helping families, the sandwich generation, to understand what the process is and what the next steps are. Because most people come to us in the time of crisis and, they're emotionally charged. They're feeling the guilt, they're feeling the resentment, they're feeling overwhelmed and don't know where to look. The amount of times that I've had a call saying, I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
So it's us helping them saying, okay, here's this company, or here's this resource, or this is available to you. Have you thought of this? And then bringing it all together for them so that we can then help them make that move forward. Okay, here's your next step, or look at this. There's nurse advocates now, because our doctors are so segmented that when you go into your general practitioner, you're basically given 10 minutes or whatever it is for your your visit, and you're only allowed to bring up one thing. We're no longer a holistic body. We are a one ailment that you can discuss. So there are now nurse advocates, case managers who are able to look at you as a whole, look at all of your prescriptions that you're taking for your multiple different issues that you're dealing with. Generally, when you're a senior, you're dealing with multiple issues. Your eyes are going, you're diabetic, you've got foot care problems, you might be dealing with liver damage, you might be dealing with cognitive issues. There might be a myriad. I know some seniors that are on 15 different medications all at the same time.
And so these nurse advocates can come in, and so how do we get linked up with one of these people?
There are several across Ottawa, several different companies across Ottawa that do this.
Okay.
One is Nurse on Board with Susan Hagar, and they will go in and they will sit down with you and go through your case history, so that they can then see all the different specialists that you're dealing with, all the different medications that you're dealing with, and give you a holistic approach to doing this. Because one specialist won't take a look at what your medications are that you're already dealing with, and they may give you something else, and the counter interaction, could be detrimental. Generally, pharmacists will step in at that point. But having a case manager that's looking at your health, your overall health, and where you're going and what can be done is great. And talking to you in a way that you can understand. So not using the medical jargon, but actually in layperson's.
So it's kind of like having a doctor do a house call, really, like back in the day.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What other resources? We've got about 2 minutes left, so I know that there are so many.
Oh, there are so many. There's from in-home care companies to mobile. There's a lot of mobile companies now that will come to you. Mobile denturists, mobile hairstylists, mobile foot care. All kinds of stuff. There's a couple of ones that I want to point out too, is that seniors a lot of seniors have dogs as companions, and there's a volunteer group called Elder Dog Canada. And Ottawa has a chapter here, and what they do is they'll come in, and it's all volunteers coming in to help with their dogs. So if the dog needs to be walked, if it needs to ride to the vet, if the senior can't go out and pick up dog food, they'll pick up dog food and deliver. So all kinds of stuff. So, and if the senior passes away, they will then take the dog in and look for another forever home for the dog.
Is this a free resource in Ottawa?
It is.
Oh
it
my
is.
gosh.
Elder Dog Canada, absolutely amazing group.
I think that's a really important point, that there are so many free resources. I think sometimes the fear comes in, how can I afford to do all of these things, and what's happening? But there's so much out there, even all across Canada and across the globe.
There are, and there's a new program that just opened up recently, which is again volunteer-based, and it's called A Friendly Voice. So a lot of seniors who are living by themselves get very, very lonely. A lot of times they don't have anybody to talk to. So this is a phone line. It's kind of like a hotline for seniors, where if you want someone to talk to you, you pick up the phone, you call A Friendly Voice, and there's always going to be somebody there to have a chat with.
I think that is, honestly, that's an amazing resource.
Yeah.
Incredible. Thank you so much for being with me,
you're very
Sue.
welcome.
Wow. You've shared a lot today, and you've helped a lot of people. When we come back, I'll share my final thoughts. Back in a moment. For most people, the idea of becoming a caregiver to a loved one is not something we aspire to or think much about. But the reality is, many of us will earn that title at some point in our lives. In order to better prepare ourselves for this event, as with most things in life, communication is at the heart of it. As we've learned from my guests tonight, having those key conversations with all members of the family is critical if we are going to manage the caregiving role in a healthy way. Too many people are suffering from burnout or compassion fatigue as they place themselves farther and farther down the list of priorities, especially for those caught in the so-called sandwich generation. There is no doubt that caregiving can be exhausting, but there are rewards in it too. As with all suffering in life, there are gifts inside, and it is our sincere wish that this episode has left you with a greater sense of hope and some important tools that will help you navigate your caregiving experience with more compassion, both for your loved one and for yourself. Thank you to Pierrette, Raymond, and Liko for exploring this topic with such grace, and thank you for being here to share in the conversation. Until next time, I want you to remember one thing, that no matter where you are, and no matter how it feels, you are never, ever alone. See you next time.